It's been a real pleasure to work with Cecily on this really monumental exhibition that covers over 20 years of photography in my practice and working really closely in selecting the works and looking for through lines.
One thing that I've always been struck by with your work is your really unique approach to art making. And I think that probably comes from your undergraduate degree in anthropology, but I definitely see an anthropologic approach to the way you're researching your subject, whether that be family or public lands, really investigating with critical but neutral, would you say, maybe eye?
It's interesting when you mentioned that neutral part, because I feel like in my earlier work, it was very personal. So we have that first image of my grandmother that I took when I was in college, like my second year of college, and I was studying anthropology and I was studying Japanese language and really thinking about my own family history and looking at that from an anthropological view, thinking about these migrational patterns, these things that we connect to, the things that remain important symbolically and also culturally over migration, over time. So I think that really started from kind of a personal perspective, but then really looking at the larger landscape and how we feel like we might kind of belong in these new lands, these new places that we've migrated to. And those times I think they become neutral when I'm really striving to be a good listener. And then other times I feel critical about how we are acting upon the land. So we get kind of a mix of both. And certainly in the work landscapes, which is here, I'm being very kind of critical about how the camera is acting upon the land. All the work we see here are selections from bodies of work, and I think that that was like really key in how we put the exhibition together. So that first picture of my grandmother, the last time that I saw her, that body of work grew over time. Like I didn't know I was making a body of work. I just knew it was important to continue to photograph there. And that was also 20 years. Ultimately, I made 87 images in the exhibition to represent every year of her life. And here we've edited down to maybe 10, which I think are 10 really important images that tell that story. So I think that the way that the work is selected also has kind of helped us see the connections between the bodies of work.
Well, I love that your earliest body of work is based around your grandmother and your relationship to your grandmother and also that family ancestry. And your newest body of work is also really looking into your family history and the impact of society and how your family as Japanese Americans were treated and also found their own survival. And that is also a way of kind of approaching that with an anthropological view.
The work Excavate Artifacts of Being is this kind of working title, this really brand new work. It's all really recalling a family story. It's really recalling this specific family story about hearing my aunt talk about burying all these things that were written in Japanese, culturally significant objects, things that you didn't want to identify with that might make you look like you were patriotic. So anything in Japanese being hidden and destroyed.
Well, and what you just said made me think of another kind of through line in many of the bodies of your work is the notion of loss. And then of course with Excavate, as you were just speaking, but looking at even these grand places and imprints. Would you talk a little bit about that?
So in Rattlesnake Lake, we're talking about loss of a place. It starts at a very personal moment where I go to the lake with a new romance, right? So I'm like thinking of this like beautiful, like, you know, who doesn't love to be in this like beautiful location and go swimming in summertime? And as I'm swimming, I can see all these stumps and they're like kind of almost like beheaded creatures. And I have been really pretty active in the environmental movement. I was living in Washington State and a lot of old growth forests were being cut. You could enjoy it one day and then see it being destroyed the next. It's a really intense time to think about how we were being humans on the planet and the kind of extractions that we were doing without really caring. It's like thinking about personal loss, thinking about loss of also habitat or maybe loss of place, loss of culture, loss of language. And then really looking at longer, deeper time, right? We're like almost looking at it from if we can, look at it from a non-human perspective, right? Looking at deep time or geological time, celestial time.
I feel looking at your work that there is such a timeless quality to the images, even when there are elements that are identifiable It really doesn't place the work in a specific time. I think this specifically about Rattlesnake Lake and some of the other works as well, but there's really this enchanting quality to it where you can imagine yourself in the space, but also in a different time. And is that something you're doing intentionally, looking at the landscape, or is that just a quality of how you're working?
It's intentional in terms of the way that I'm making is happening across a great amount of time. Also, a lot of times my images are actually photographed, like the actual exposure of the image, especially working with the 4x5 camera, the large format field camera. It's one image at a time. Pull the slide, you make the exposure, and sometimes exposure is 8 minutes long, 10 minutes long, 30 minutes long, maybe 5 seconds, but maybe even half a second if it's bright enough. But I love to photograph at this time of day that is a little ambiguous. So often at dusk or at dawn, and we see that in Hatsubon, we see that in Rattlesnake Lake, in Near and Far.
In your work, there is such a strong intentionality. You think about the materials you're using, you think about the process you're using. Of course, when you're using a large format camera, the timing is really important and the lighting, and you can only take that shot once because then the light has changed. I think the way you are approaching art making as a photographer is very different from the way a lot of people may think about photography. You're not taking hundreds of images and selecting the best one, but you really have to set it up intentionally and know exactly what you're going for and get that one shot.
Yeah, sometimes there's only one. And then the moment passes or it's too dark. And I think that was really important with Hatsubon. Yes, so this is the moment before dawn and then when the sun, and we're actually releasing the boat as the moment that the sun first hits the water.
Such a moving moment.
I remember at that moment too thinking, this is the moment, this is the ceremony. This isn't a
Performance.
I knew it was really important that we did this. I wasn't intentionally thinking, oh, I'm gonna make a body of work around it until the body of work wanted to be made, right? It was like being guided, oh, now I have these images, they need to be shared.
And your family, your sister and your mother were supportive of you documenting the ceremony and the process and creating this body of work?
Yeah, they were. Even actually right after my father passed away, my mother asked me to take a photograph.
It's a really moving image, and there's a way that everyone can connect with this work. Each have our own experience with loss and death, and it's expressed in such a beautiful way that the viewer can connect with.
I think that there's something that's really happened to me as a human being about really trying to honor the past that's preceded me and to really acknowledge who I've been able to become today as an artist and just a human on this planet.